The rain hammered against Corporal Eli Wren's survey tent with the fury of a living thing, each droplet striking the reinforced fabric like bullets from an angry sky. He'd weathered dozens of these storms during his 6-month assignment on Kepler 4b, but tonight's tempest felt different, more violent, more personal somehow. The wind howled through the dense jungle canopy above, sending branches crashing down in the darkness beyond his small circle of safety. Eli checked his equipment readings one final time. Before sealing them in waterproof cases, the atmospheric disturbance would last hours, maybe until dawn. He'd learned to find peace in these moments of enforced solitude, listening to nature's raw power while sipping recycled coffee that tasted like metal and regret. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his tense interior in stark white relief. In that brief flash, he caught sight of his reflection in the portable mirror mounted near his sleeping area. Sandy hair disheveled, stubble shadowing his jaw, green eyes tired from long days mapping this alien world's resources. At 28, he was young for a deep space surveyor, but the isolation had aged him in ways that showed more in his expression than his face. The tent flap suddenly burst open, admitting a torrent of wind and rain that sent his carefully organized supplies scattering. Eli lunged forward to secure the entrance, assuming the magnetic seals had failed under the storm's assault. But as he reached for the flap, a figure stumbled inside, tall, graceful despite her obvious distress, and utterly alien. She was unlike anything he'd encountered in his xenobiology training. Her skin held the pale blue luminescence of deep ice, seeming to generate its own soft light that pulsed gently beneath the surface. Cascading red curls, now darkened to burgundy by rainwater, framed a face of elegant angles and large, expressive eyes that shimmered like captured starlight. She wore what appeared to be a ceremonial robe of silver fabric that clung to her slender frame, every line of her body visible through the soaked material. But it was her hands that made his breath catch, delicate, perfectly formed, with 2 arms ending in hands with 5 fingers each, just like his own. Her legs, long and graceful, carried her with an otherworldly elegance, even as she shivered uncontrollably from the cold rain. "Please," she whispered in accented but clear standard, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Water dripped from her hair and clothes, forming small puddles on his tent floor. I couldn't." She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself as another violent shudder ran through her frame. Her eyes, now he could see they were the color of Arctic ice, shot through with silver, darted around the tent's interior with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked almost like terror. "It's okay," Eli said softly, his training kicking in despite his shock at her sudden appearance. First contact protocols seemed absurdly inadequate for a soaking wet alien woman seeking shelter in his tent during a thunderstorm. "You're safe. Here." He grabbed his thermal blanket from his sleeping bag, approaching her slowly with his hands visible and non-threatening. She didn't retreat, but he could sense her tension, the way her muscles coiled as if ready to flee despite having just sought refuge. "Here," he said, holding out the blanket. "You're freezing." She accepted it with trembling hands, her fingers briefly brushing his. Her skin was surprisingly warm despite her obvious chill, and that soft luminescence pulsed brighter at the contact. When she wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, her eyes met his directly for the first time. "We've never known rain," she whispered, and those 4 words contained such wonder and fear that Eli felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening in a room he'd kept locked for years. Thunder crashed overhead, making her flinch and step closer to him instinctively. In that moment, with this beautiful, terrified alien woman seeking comfort in his small shelter while the storm raged around them, Eli realized his careful, solitary life was about to change forever. The thunder rolled across the jungle like the voice of an ancient god, and Liravishi had whispered her name between shivers pressed closer to Ellie's side. They sat on his narrow cot, the thermal blanket draped around both their shoulders, her damp red curls tickling his cheek as she turned toward every new sound the storm made. "What is that rumbling?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain's relentless percussion. "It comes after the light fire in the sky. Thunder," Eli explained, acutely aware of her warmth against his shoulder, the way her luminescent skin cast gentle shadows on the tent walls. Sound travels slower than light, so you hear it after you see the lightning. She absorbed this information with the intensity of a scholar, her silver-flecked eyes studying his face, as if memorizing every detail. On Aurelia Prime, we have light storms beautiful, cascades of energy that dance through our crystal formations, but they make no sound. They simply sing in frequencies we feel rather than hear. Eli found himself captivated by her voice, the way she spoke of her world with such poetry. "What's it like? Your planet?" "Dry," she said with a soft laugh that sounded like distant bells. "Everything is crystal and mineral, carved by wind and time. We absorb moisture from the air itself, through our skin. But this," she gestured toward the tent walls, where rain continued its assault. "This liquid falling from the sky, it's terrifying and magnificent." When lightning flashed again, closer this time, she instinctively pressed against him. Eli felt the rapid flutter of her pulse where her neck touched his arm, surprisingly fast and delicate. Without thinking, he placed his hand over hers where it gripped the blanket. "Why do you close your eyes when it touches you?" she asked suddenly. "Earlier, before I entered your shelter, I watched you put your hand outside. The water drops fell on your skin and you smiled." Eli considered this, realizing he'd never really thought about it before. "Rain reminds me of home, I suppose. Earth. There's something peaceful about it, cleansing. My grandmother used to say rain washed away the day's troubles." "Your grandmother?" Lyriva tilted her head, curious. "The mother of one of my parents. We form family units across generations." He paused, studying her profile in the tense dim light. "Do your people have families?" "We have genetic lines and research clusters," she said, then hesitated. "But nothing like what you describe. We're solitary in our pursuits. I came to this world with 5 other scientists, but we rarely interact beyond necessity." The loneliness in her voice struck something deep in Ellie's chest. "Is that why you came here, to my tent?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. "The storm frightened me in ways I didn't expect. The chaos of it, the unpredictability. On Aurelia Prime, everything follows patterns, crystal growth, energy flows. Even our thoughts tend toward mathematical precision. But this, another crash of thunder made her shiver. This is pure chaos, and I realized I didn't want to face it alone." "Why me?" Eli asked softly. "Why not return to your team?" "Because," she turned to face him fully, their faces inches apart in the blanket's warm cocoon. "Because when I observed you from a distance during my research, you seemed to understand solitude without being broken by it. And when the rain began, you didn't seek shelter immediately like the others would. You stood in it, let it touch you, welcomed it." Their eyes met and held. Eli could see tiny flecks of gold in her silver irises, could smell something like ozone and starlight on her skin. The space between them seemed to thrum with potential energy. "Your people," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Do they experience physical affection?" Color flowed beneath her skin like aurora lights, concentrated in her cheeks. "We share energy sometimes. During deep research phases, we can connect our bioelectric fields. But physical touch." She lifted her free hand tentatively toward his face, stopping just short of contact. "We're taught it's inefficient, distracting. And what do you think?" Eli asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I think," she whispered, finally letting her fingertips brush his cheek, "that efficiency is overrated." The moment her skin touched his, Eli felt a gentle tingling, warm and electric. Her eyes widened in wonder, the luminescence beneath her skin brightening like captured starlight. "You feel it too," she breathed. "Yes," he admitted, covering her hand with his, holding it against his face. Outside, the storm continued its wild symphony. But inside their small shelter, something entirely new was being born, fragile and precious as the first drops of rain on a world that had never known storms. The tent seemed smaller now, intimate in a way that made every breath they shared feel significant. Lyriva's hand remained pressed against Ellie's cheek, her touch sending gentle waves of that strange, warm electricity through his skin. In the soft glow of her luminescence, he could see the wonder and uncertainty flickering across her features. "Does it hurt?" she asked, studying his face with scientific curiosity. Tinged with something deeper, when I touch you, I feel your life force. It's different from ours, warmer, more chaotic. It doesn't hurt, Eli murmured, turning his head slightly to press a soft kiss to her palm. The action seemed to surprise them both. Her skin pulsed brighter, and she drew in a sharp breath. Does that hurt you? No, she whispered, her voice carrying a note of amazement. It's like touching pure energy, but gentle, controlled. She traced her thumb along his lower lip, marveling at the texture. Your skin is so different from mine, softer, more giving. Eli couldn't help but smile at her clinical description. What does your skin feel like to you? Firm, resilient. We're built to withstand the harsh conditions of our world, crystal dust storms, radiation fluctuations. She paused, looking down at where their hands intertwined. But touching you makes me feel delicate, feminine in a way I've never experienced. The vulnerability in her admission made Ellie's chest tighten. You are feminine, he said softly. Beautifully so. Color cascaded beneath her skin like liquid light, and she looked away shyly. On Aurelia Prime, gender is largely irrelevant. We reproduce through genetic synthesis when necessary, but physical attraction, emotional bonding. She met his eyes again. We were taught these were evolutionary inefficiencies that other species hadn't yet overcome, and now I think, perhaps we were wrong about many things. She shifted closer on the narrow cot, her leg pressing against his. May I explore? Your differences fascinate me, Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. Her scientific approach to intimacy was somehow more erotic than any seduction he'd ever experienced. She began with his hands, tracing each finger, marveling at his calluses from years of manual labor. The way his pulse jumped at his wrist when she pressed her thumb there. Your heart beats so fast, she observed, placing her palm flat against his chest. Ours are slower, more efficient. It's beating fast because of you, Eli admitted, causing her to look up at him in surprise. I cause physiological changes in you, among other things. He reached up to touch her hair, the red curls still damp but warming under his fingers. You're beautiful, Liriva, in ways that have nothing to do with biology or efficiency. She leaned into his touch like a cat seeking warmth. Show me, she whispered. Show me what beauty means to your species. Eli cupped her face gently, thumbs tracing her elegant cheekbones. It means this, he said, leaning forward to press his lips to her forehead. Reverence. He kissed her left temple, then her right. Appreciation. His lips found the corner of her mouth. Desire. When their lips finally met, it was electric in the most literal sense. The gentle tingling sensation he'd felt from her touch intensified, creating a circuit of energy between them. Liriva made a soft sound of surprise and pleasure, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pressed closer. The kiss deepened naturally, her lips parting under his as she learned the rhythm of human affection. Her luminescence brightened until the tent was filled with soft, ethereal light that pulsed in time with their heartbeats. This is what we were missing, she whispered against his lips, wonder thick in her voice. This connection, this merging of energies. Thunder crashed overhead, but neither of them flinched this time. They were lost in their own storm, one of touch and discovery, of two beings from different worlds finding something universal in each other's arms. Ellie's hands skimmed down her sides, feeling the way her breath hitched at his touch. The silver fabric of her robe had begun to dry, but it still clung to her curves in ways that made his pulse race. Is this okay? He asked, fingertips finding the edge of the fabric at her shoulder. Yes, she breathed, her own hands exploring the muscles of his back through his shirt. I want to understand all of it. The way you make me feel, the way my body responds to yours. As they slowly, reverently began to undress each other, the storm outside seemed to mirror their own building intensity. But in their small shelter, illuminated by her otherworldly glow, they created their own perfect weather, warm, electric, and full of the promise of transformation. The thermal blanket fell away as they moved together in the soft radiance of Liriva's skin. Eli had seen many beautiful things in his travels across the galaxy, but nothing compared to the sight of her elegant limbs glowing like captured moonlight, red hair fanned across his pillow like liquid fire, eyes that held the depth of stars. "You're trembling," he whispered, running his hands along her arms, marveling at the way her luminescence pulsed brighter under his touch. "Not from cold," she replied, her voice breathless with wonder. "From anticipation, fear? I don't have words for this feeling. We call it desire," Eli said softly, pressing gentle kisses along her collarbone. Each touch of his lips sent ripples of light across her skin like stones, dropped in a phosphorescent pool. "Want? Need?" "Yes," she gasped as he found a particularly sensitive spot at the base of her throat. "Need. I understand now why your species values this so highly." Her hands explored the planes of his chest, curious and reverent. "Your skin tells stories," she murmured, fingertips tracing a scar from his shoulder. "This mark, how did you acquire it?" "Mining accident on Titan," he said, then caught his breath as she leaned down to press her lips to the old wound. "Liriva, does it pain you when I touch it?" "No," he managed, threading his fingers through her hair. "Nothing could pain me right now." She smiled at that, a radiant expression that made her whole face luminous. "Your emotions are so intense, so immediate. I can feel them through your skin, want and tenderness and something deeper." "Love," Eli said without thinking, then froze. The word hung between them like a challenge. Liriva's eyes widened, her skin flickering uncertainly. "Love, but we've only just met. Is this possible for your species?" "Sometimes," he said carefully, studying her face. "When do people connect on levels deeper than the physical? Mind, heart, soul, soul." She repeated thoughtfully. "We don't have this concept on Aurelia Prime. We believe consciousness ends when biological functions cease." And now, she was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting over his heart. "Now I think perhaps there are forms of consciousness that transcend individual biology. When I touch you, I feel expanded, like I'm becoming more than just myself." Their lovemaking was slow, exploratory, punctuated by soft gasps of amazement from both of them. Every touch was a question, every caress an answer. Liriva's skin grew brighter as their passion intensified, until the tent was filled with dancing light that synchronized with their movements. "I understand now," she whispered as they moved together, her voice thick with emotion. "Why beings across the galaxy risk everything for this connection. It's not just physical pleasure, it's transcendence." Eli could only nod, lost in the sensation of her, the way she felt both alien and perfectly familiar in his arms. Her energy field seemed to merge with his own life force, creating something entirely new, a shared consciousness that existed in the space between their joined bodies. When release finally claimed them, it was like lightning striking in reverse energy, flowing up from the earth rather than down from the sky. Liriva's luminescence flared so brightly that for a moment the tent was filled with pure white light, and Eli felt as though he was touching the heart of a star. They lay tangled together afterward, her head on his chest, both their skin glowing. Faintly in the aftermath, the rain continued its rhythm on the tent walls, but it sounded different now, peaceful rather than violent, like a lullaby sung by the planet itself. "What happens now?" Liriva asked quietly, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "My research mission here ends in 10 standard days." Ellie's arms tightened around her. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out, will we?" She lifted her head to look at him, uncertainty clouding her features. "Your people and mine were not just different species. We're from entirely different philosophies of existence." "Then maybe it's time for new philosophies," Eli said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Tonight you learned about rain, about desire, about connection. Who knows what else is possible?" Outside, the storm began to quiet, but inside their shelter, something profound had been born, fragile, as new love always is, but burning bright as the light beneath Liriva's skin. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, to hearts beating in rhythm with the rain. Dawn crept through the jungle canopy with fingers of gold and green, painting the tent walls in gentle, shifting patterns. The storm had passed some time before sunrise, leaving behind the clean smell of rain-washed earth and the steady drip of water from saturated leaves. Eli woke to find Liriva already awake beside him, her skin glowing softly in the morning light as she watched the play of shadows with fascination. "Does your sun always paint such colors when it rises?" she asked, not taking her eyes from the tent wall where golden light filtered through the fabric. "Every day, but always different," Eli replied, tightening his arm around her waist. "Like you'll never see exactly the same sunrise twice. On Aurelia Prime, our star is white-hot and constant. Dawn is simply the moment when the planetary rotation brings us back into full illumination. Very efficient," she said with a rueful smile, but perhaps lacking in poetry. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, both aware that the approaching day would bring complications they weren't ready to face. Eli could hear the distant sounds of the research camp, stirring to life, voices calling through the jungle, the hum of equipment being powered up after the storm. "They'll be looking for me soon," Lirava said quietly, echoing his thoughts. "My absence will have been noted. What will you tell them?" "That I sought shelter from the storm with a human surveyor." She turned to face him, silver eyes serious. "They'll disapprove, of course. Physical contact between species is considered unprofessional in Arellan research protocols." Eli traced a finger along her jaw, marveling again at the way her skin responded to his touch with gentle pulses of light. "Is that all this was to you? Research? You know it wasn't." Her hand covered his, pressing it against her cheek. "What happened between us last night, it's changed everything. I can't simply return to my old way of thinking, my old way of being." "Then don't." "It's not that simple, Eli. My people have expectations. Your people aren't living your life," he interrupted gently. "You are." She was quiet for a moment, considering this. "On Aurelia Prime, individual desires are secondary to collective advancement. What I want, what I feel, it's irrelevant if it doesn't serve the greater good." "And what do you want?" "You," she said without hesitation, then looked surprised at her own certainty. "I want more mornings like this, more conversations that stretch into the night. I want to learn about your grandmother's stories and show you the crystal gardens of my world. I want," she paused, struggling with unfamiliar emotions. "I want what humans call a future together." Eli felt his heart expand in his chest. "Then, we'll find a way to make that happen." "How?" "Your assignment here ends in 3 months. My research mission concludes in 10 days. After that, I'm expected to return home for 5 years of data analysis and report preparation." "There are ways," Eli said, his mind already working through possibilities. "Transfer requests, extended assignments, joint research proposals. The Galactic Council has been pushing for more interspecies cooperation." Hope flickered in her eyes, causing her skin to pulse brighter. "You would do that? Alter your career path for someone you've known for less than one planetary rotation?" "I'd do it for someone who taught me that rain could sound like music," he said, leaning in to kiss her softly. "For someone who glows like starlight when she's happy. For someone who made me realize I've been living half a life until now." Tears, actual, liquid tears, not the energy discharges her people typically produced, gathered in her eyes. "Your species really does experience emotions with remarkable intensity. Is that a bad thing?" "No," she whispered against his lips. "I think it might be the most beautiful thing in the universe." The sound of voices grew closer, and they both knew their private bubble was about to burst. Reluctantly, they began to dress, helping each other smooth away the obvious signs of their night together. "Whatever happens," Eli said as he handed her the silver robe, now dry and shimmering in the morning light, "last night was real. What we felt, what we discovered together, that can't be taken away." "No," she agreed, securing the robe's fastenings with new confidence. "It can't." And Eli, she turned to face him one last time before opening the tent flap. "Thank you for teaching me about rain." As she stepped out into the morning jungle, leaving him with only the faint scent of ozone and starlight, Eli smiled. Last night, a storm had brought them together. Today, they would begin the more challenging work of building something that could weather any tempest. A love that transcended species, worlds, and the vast distances between stars. Outside, he could hear Lirava's voice mixing with those of her research team, already spinning the night's events into something professionally acceptable. But he could also hear the new note in her voice: confidence, determination, joy. She had learned about more than rain in his tent. She had learned about choice, about desire, about the possibility of writing her own story. And somewhere in the space between worlds, their future was already beginning to take shape. as inevitable and beautiful as the first drops of rain on a desert planet.